you something is very wrong here. Gut instinct turned out to be right. Story 1. My friend asked me if I wanted to go out to the woods with him and explore abandoned places. He even specifically mentioned that he'll bring a firearm to keep us safe. My alarm bells were ringing. I asked him a couple questions, I don't know what, but concluded that it was sketchy as my gut told me not to go. So I exited from the conversation while he went asking others the same question. Fast forward a couple years, I heard that he was in prison. I was stunned, but remember the memory when he asked me if I wanted to go into the woods. Turns out he took a freshman, him being senior at that time, and kept his promise of looking for abandoned places. He found a cabin in the woods, brought his friend inside, and as soon as his friend turned his back, bam, knocked dead, he shot him in the back of the head. I reminisce on this quite often and think, what if I had agreed? Every time I think of this, I'm very grateful I'm alive. Story 2. I was walking home, and a woman approached me to ask for directions. I told her how to get where she wanted to go, but she didn't walk that way, but instead walked beside me and kept pace with me. This made me incredibly uncomfortable, so I said have a nice day and double my speed, not running, but outpacing her significantly. A moment later, I heard running footsteps. I must have instinctively gripped my purse strap because I held onto it as she ran by and tried to it. We ended up tussling for a moment. I shouted very loudly, help. She's stealing my purse. Neighbors came outside, causing her to walk away. She did not get my purse. Story 3. Driving with a friend of mine through a pretty remote forest road. A couple of guys in the middle of nowhere tried flagging us down. I almost stopped for them before an alarm went off in my head, and I stepped on the gas. My friend started saying, what the foo? And at the same time, there was a shot, and a bullet hit the back of the car. We made it to a police station. Turns out there had been a bunch of people and vehicles going missing in the area that same week. Story 4. Laid eyes on my sister's then boyfriend and instantly hated him. I then noticed one of our dogs acted out of character around him, which made me hate him even more. We found out a year later the boyfriend had been beating her regularly. Edit, he was beating my sister, not the dog. Story 5. Freshman year of college. A friend and I were driving across town, and he stopped for gas. It wasn't a dangerous part of town or anything, just a quiet gas station with an old Buick out front. But this feeling came over me that we needed to get out of there. I tried to shake the feeling by making a joke. This feels like somewhere an axe murderer would hide out. My friend immediately gunned it out of there without filling up. He said he had the same feeling, and me bringing it up too scared the out of him. On the way home, there were about 20 police cars outside. It turns out some guy shot 2 people in a carjacking and robbery. The Buick was the car he stole. Story 6. I had a bad feeling about my aunt's boyfriend. Told my mom he seemed creepy, and I didn't want to stay the night there anymore. I got a bit of a lecture for calling him creepy, but she made sure I was never around him alone. And good thing. He turned out to be a child molester who is currently in jail for his involvement in a kiddie ring. Story 7. I stopped off at a dollar store to get last-minute stuff for my niece's birthday party, foil or napkins or something. I went to the one I had never been to in a seedy part of town. There weren't many other people there, since it was a Sunday afternoon. A luxury car pulls up, and this gorgeous man gets out and starts trying to catch my eye, like he wanted to ask directions. Dream come true, right? Except my gut started screaming run for no reason. I pretended I didn't see him and got in my car and left. The next morning, I see on the news that 3 people were murdered in Charleston. They were all connected to one dude. One of their cars was stolen, and the serial killer was on the loose heading west, through my area. Guess who the suspect was? Yep, the dude ID seen. They arrested him after Head kidnapped a girl in Augusta the same night I saw him. And she managed to escape. Still gives me goosebumps. What if ID stopped and talked to him? Story 8. In high school, I came home early one Friday evening to find that my house just fell off. It's so hard to describe, but the feeling I got walking into my living room just immediately had me on alert and didn't feel right. I walked into the kitchen to find a half-eaten burger from McDonald's, which I found strange. Called out to my parents, got no response, called them on their cell, got no answer. 30 minutes later, my brother called to tell me that my dad had a heart attack and to get to the hospital. Thankfully, it turned out okay, but my gut quite literally knew something bad had happened the moment I stepped in the front door. Story 9. I've always been prone to gut feelings, but my mom's takes the cake. She went to a boarding school and ended up leaving her senior year, but her 2 best friends still went there. They all lived in similar areas for summer, and my mom wanted to go back and see everyone towards the end of summer break when she was 17. All 3 girls, including my mom, were going to take a train to a nearby station and meet up there and take a taxi to the school. My mom got to our home train station and got hysterical, which she never does, and told her mom she has a horrible feeling and doesn't want to go. Her mom told her to absolutely not go, and they went home. Later on that night, they got a call that the 2 girls who were in a car accident with a drunk taxi driver on the way to the school. My mom's most best friend in the world was thrown from the car and decapitated. The other girl was so severely injured that she was more or less a vegetable and paralyzed from the neck down. She lived about another decade, unable to speak or move, and then passed away in a home. My mom has been through the ringer in life, but this has always made her tell me to always follow my gut feeling. She said she never had a gut feeling when she was a teen, and this was the only time she ever did. She was looking forward to this trip for months, but that feeling was enough to make her back outright when she was boarding the train. My mom is so strong, and not sure why this happened, but am thankful for whatever power allowed my mother to be okay. Story 10, I love my stepsister to pieces, but she is way too trusting with people she doesn't know well. About 10 years ago, she was living with a couple of roommates who became her best friends. She would tell me stories about them over the phone. We lived in different cities, and I would just think, Jesus Christ, these girls are messes. She could hear the wariness in my voice after telling me stories about their troubled lives and how they're really good people who have just been through a lot. I didn't buy it. I can't think of all the stories because it's been too long, but they were always sketchy, as cut to my stepsister, inheriting $20K from a deceased relative. She was young and super excited about it, and I knew she probably didn't keep the new money a secret. About 1 week later, one of her roommates calls her panicking, saying that this guy who she's been talking to online kidnapped her and was holding her for ransom, a $15K ransom. And she called my stepsister for the ransom, not her parents. Her roommate. She calls me, freaking out because she didn't know what to do. I asked her if she had told her roommate about the money. Of course she did. Move out, sis. GTFO. Those little girls who are really good people, but have just been through a lot. Yeah, they're liars. She reluctantly followed my advice, and thankfully didn't try to make a deal with them. I told her to call the police. If I remember correctly, she didn't. She still worries me sometimes. Story 11, I was walking home when suddenly I had this gut feeling I'll be mugged. I kept walking. When I got to the corner, two guys jumped me, started delivering some puckneys, but man, I'm no Rocky. My shirt was devastated. My nose was bleeding. I glass flew like 3 meters away. Oh yeah, most importantly, got mugged anyway. Story 12, at a party in college. 2 thoughts occurred at the same time. 1, wow, there's a lot of people here. And 2, a lot of these girls look really young. Nope, the out. Found out later party was busted, and people were in jail for a variety of things. 0. Story 13, 1:30 a.m., leaving a club with a well-lit parking lot. We had just bought a bottled water and were walking to the car. We saw a couple, guy holding girl and girl throwing up, offered the guy to give the girl her water. He took a swig, didn't give her any, and put it back on the car they were between. We were a little taken aback and told him to give her the water. He made a vile, disgusting face as if we were cheering him on. We walked a few feet and knew something was wrong. Had the guys we were with checked back, and he was pants down while she was unconscious, not puking. He was forcing himself from behinks. From the front, it looked like all clothes were still on. Once discovered, they fell to the floor, and she smacked her head on the pavement. My friends beat the out of him, and we called the police, tried to comfort the girl, although she was very confused and disoriented. For some reason, he was insistent on explaining himself and calling to her by a wrong name, filed a police report, found her dumbfounded friends, answered all of the detectives' questions when they called for a follow-up statement to give to the district attorney. Evil has a feeling. If you see something, say something. Looking dumb or feeling dumb is much less shitty than what could actually be happening. Story 14, went to see fireworks one time. As I was watching, I got a bad feeling being as close as I was, and even wondered how many people have died for fireworks. Not even 30 seconds later, one of the launch pipes for the fireworks tipped or something. All I remember were fireworks launching and exploding right in my direction, and one of the firework tails whizzing right past my head. Then me running away like mad. Story 15, so I had a friend who I slowly had a worse relationship with as the years went on. I threw a party at my house, and my invitation's very specific. I was in one of the phases where we had a recent argument, and I didn't want to talk to him. He shows up at the party. I noticed him, but my dumb brain decided, oh, I must have invited him without thinking. We party for a few hours, then everybody starts leaving. Before we leave, however, that friend tells me to come to the basement. My basement isn't exactly one of those hangout basements. No, it's a stone underground room full of cracks and a sewage drain. Alarms go off in my head because I knew how mad and vengeful he could get, and he was pretty upset after the argument. I tell him in a second I need to change. There's still 1 or 2 guests in the house, luckily. I go to my room and text one of the guests about the situation. He tells me to walk the dog. Then, when we go outside, me and the dog go into the car, and I stay the night at his house. Before I leave the next morning, I call the police, and they check the house before I go in. To my horror, they come out with my friend detained. Later he was hiding in the basement with a knife waiting for me. It gives me chills to this day thinking about him. Edit, the cop part was a lie, sorry. It was just a couple of friends with a taser. Story 16, went out for beers with some friends. Guy at the bar kept staring at my female friend. Didn't think nothing of it, initially thought maybe he's just into her. Alarm bells start ringing for some reason. Minutes later, he went to my friend, then saw him try to slip something in her drink while she was talking to another friend of ours. Good thing I was watching told him off with that roofie. He tried to punch me, but Miss Bouncer saw he got kicked out. Funniest part was that when we met up with a mate of mine from uni that night, he was beating for doing the same thing to his GF. Watch your drink, lads. Story 17, my freshman year. My math class had a substitute teacher who we all agreed was really weird and creepy. He really only talked to the girls and made inappropriate comments. For context, this man was easily in his 60s. Well, when our teacher came back the next week, we complained to him about the sub and talked about him being a creeper. The teacher was very upset. He said, "I will not stand sub being disrespected like this. I have known this man for a decade, and he is a kind, good man who would never do anything to a student or any person." 1 week later, sub was caught in the middle of the night, breaking and entering a college girl's apartment, and I believe trying to assault her or doing some other perverse thing. Teacher came in the next day and apologized. Edit, he was only charged with residential burglary of felony, but it was a woman's home at night. Story 18, less dramatic than a lot of others, but nonetheless, near my old apartment, there was a back road that you would take to get to Target. However, you had to go through one stoplight that was just on the other side of the hill's crest from my side. The view is slightly blocked by a building towards the hill's high side. I pull up to the light and wait for it to turn green. It turns, and I wait for a second. The person behind me even honks, but something held me back before I can even think about starting to go. One of the open trailer trucks used to move construction equipment comes flying through their red lighting at probably 40 to 50 miles per hour. Not sure if I would have been hit or someone else, but I'm glad I didn't go. Story 19, I have a coworker I've always found to be a little off and didn't like spending time with. We all thought he was off a little, but we wrote it off as just normal IT geek weird. Last Friday, he was arrested for child exploitation of children and assault of a minor in videoing. Story 20, I was away on a trip in the mountains with my school. My roommates woke me up at like 3 a.m. and wanted to go skinny dip in the pool. I was fine till we got outside. It was pitch dark and the woods were abnormally silent. I've been camping and hiking a lot in my life, so I knew to trust my gut feeling and the sounds of the forest. I practically had to drag my friends back inside, being sure to make noise the whole way. The next morning, we were kept inside for the morning because a huge black bear was outside strolling around. The prints showed that he had been there for hours, including the time that my friends and I were out. Story 21, tons of comments here, so not many will see this. But one day, I was finishing up an essay in the library of my college when I saw someone through the slightly open blinds running. She could have been running to get to a class, meet someone, or 1,000 other things. For some reason, I stood up. My girlfriend saw me stand up and ran to me immediately, and we ran out the emergency exit of the library. We then ran to the opposite end of the college where everyone was acting normal. We climbed down to the river, called my dad to pick us up down the road, and left the campus following the riverbed. Turns out the girl was running because someone was shooting people. The shooter was making his way into the library as we were running out. When we hit the emergency exit, the main doors locked from the outside, and he was unable to enter the library, which led to him getting shot and killed by the police. Story 22X started hanging out with my best friend. Things started feeling weird, so I continued to ask if things were okay. She always said yes. Weeks later, she left me, and weeks after that found out that she was with my best friend. Story 23, this girl asked me out one time, and in my head, I was like, no, don't do this. Something's going to go wrong. Half a year later, it turned out she assaulted a guy who she was dating and broke his ribs and an arm. Story 24, middle school vice principal was loved by everyone in the school. I was always creeped out by him. In my 8th grade year, he was found having with a previous student of his who was only 16 at the time. He had a wife and kids when this all went down. Story 25, a dude named Jeff. He spoke in a way I can't describe, but was generally speaking just like wrong sounding. He always gave me bad vibes when I was around him, and he ended up being a nice guy and got stalker level obsessed with the girl I was dating. Story 26, not me, but my mom for me. When I was a baby, only a few months old, my mom felt a little lump on the right side near the bottom of my rib cage. She took me to my doctor and asked him to check, and he said it was nothing. A few weeks later, she still felt it. So she took me to a different doctor, and the same thing happened. It wasn't until she took me to a third doctor and demanded tests be done that they found I had a tumor growing. Edit, talked to my mom and asked for more details. Apparently, she took me in when I was only 1 month old, saying she felt something about the size of a pea. The doctor said it was nothing, and every few weeks she would go back and check. The third doctor only did the x-ray because she kept bugging him. By this time, I was already 9 months old, and it was almost the size of a walnut before they took it out. This was also in '95. Story 27 was walking through my hometown with mother and ex-stepdad. I was roughly 14, I think. Suddenly a man came up to us and greeted us. As soon as he shook my hand, I knew something was very wrong. Ex-stepdad knew him, so they engaged in small talk. The whole thing lasted less than a few minutes. But the entire time, I felt this very strange and strong uneasiness. I whispered to my mom that the man that came up really feels shifty despite his normal appearance and behavior, and I told her we should leave ASAP. When he left, I asked her who that was, and she told me he was an acquaintance from way back, and he was also a man with some serious mental issues who was prone to sudden bursts of psychosis that would send him into a violent rage. Turns out he ran away from his caretaker that day and was carrying a knife in his pants. He was caught later on during the day and brought back to the local mental facility. Thankfully, the knife remained unused. Story 28, there was a rural highway that had a few driveways on it. The car in front of me was making a left turn into a driveway and was waiting for cross traffic to stop. I kind of leaned back and took a deep sigh and then immediately felt impending doom. My thought was, wouldn't it be freaky weird if I got into a car accident? Then a dump truck rear-ended me at 70 miles per hour. By all means, I should be dead, but I actually walked away with nothing more than shattered glass ending up all over my face. Because a utility truck between us, I was safe from death. Story 29 happened today. The amount of food was too much for my small plate, but I ignore my gut instinct. It ended with my chicken leg falling on the floor. I'm going to trust my feelings next time. Story 30, my sister started dating this guy that I didn't like, and I didn't even have a reason for not liking him. I just didn't like him. And fast forward about 4 weeks, and my sister asked if I wanted to hang out with her at her boyfriend's house. I said no, but she kept insisting, but I still kept saying no. So my sister ended up going by herself, and fast forward to the next day, and my sister came in the house, and it looked like something was wrong. So I asked her what's wrong, and she told me about how her boyfriend had 2 drawers full of money and 4 guns on his nightstand. And when she asked about it, he just said, "Don't worry about it," and tried to kiss her. She kicked him in the end and ran home. Story 31 ID, been living on the top floor of an apartment complex with no downstairs neighbors for a few years. Then a few months ago, 2 new families moved in. At first, I thought they were doing renovations to flip the place because there was so much constant noise that was so loud. I figured it could only be construction. Nope, it was partying and fighting. I started getting this horrible anxiety that somehow they were going to break their ceiling, my floor, and everything would fall and be ruined. That didn't happen, but they did burn the place down. Story 32, not my gut instinct, but my friends. When I was 16, I was chilling with my friend, both really small for our age, 157 centimeters on a playground beside a road. That road wasn't too busy, but every once in a while a car drives by. My friend and I were just talking about random stuff when we noticed a car driving by. It was an old car, and the engine made a quite unique sound, and we were laughing about it. A few minutes later, that same car drives by again. My friend tells me it's weird and that we should leave. It was already dark at this point. I just told her to stop being paranoid, but agreed to turn off my phone, so in case he came by again, he wouldn't be able to see my phone light up. Sure enough, he drove by again, and my friend went on the ground hoping he wouldn't see us. I was getting suspicious at that point and went down with her. We agreed to leave, got up and started walking towards the road to get home as the car pulls up behind us, drives by us and parks right in front of us. We see the door opening and start running at this point. I still thought it was ridiculous to run away at the end of the road. I turn around to look, and the guy has now gotten back in his car and is driving in our direction. Lucky us, there was a road that was currently in maintenance and cars couldn't pass through. So I grabbed my friend's hand and rushed through it. The car got slower at the intersection, but then drove off. I'm really glad my friend was this suspicious because God knows what would have happened to us if we stayed at that playground. Story 33, I was in 3rd grade and my little sister in 2nd, and we were walking from the bus stop to our house. I remember the walk wasn't too long, but my dad wasn't there waiting for us, and he usually was, especially because it was raining. So I grab my sister's hand, and we start walking in a giant group of kids that starts to dwindle off the further we get into the neighborhood. Well, this car pulls up, and this man sticks his head out and says my name and my sister's name. I got really freaked out, and he says my dad told him to get us and take us home cause he was worried about the rain. I instantly get terrified, and I get the worst gut feeling ever. 1, because my dad would never send someone to get us, and 2, would have known beforehand. So I say no, and this man insists on us getting into the car. So I ask him what the password is. My parents always gave us a password to follow if they sent someone or something was supposed to happen. Like if we were answering the door, we'd ask what the password was, and they would say blueberry. Well, this man looks at me and laughs really weirdly and says our password, which is weird because it was in Arabic, and this man was obviously not Arab in any way, plus he said it's so wrong. He starts to try to usher us into the car and tell us how we could get sick from the rain and stuff. I immediately start screaming, and I guess the high school bus is just let out, and this huge teenage just starts screaming at this man, and another teenage is pulling me and my sisters down the street and telling a shell take us home. At that exact moment, my mom is walking down the street with an umbrella, and the man is gone. I told my dad about this guy, and I guess the prison my dad worked at, one of the inmates had essentially put a hit out on my dad, and they thought to kidnap us. Still no idea how he knew what the password was. But yeah, terrifying. I can only image what would have happened if we had just gotten into the car. Story 34. I started learning to play the alto saxophone when I was 11 at my Christian primary school. Absolutely hated my music teacher. There was something about him that made my body physically react in a get away from me manner. I would frequently beg to skip lessons, fake being sick, tell my mom I hated it and didn't want to learn anymore. So eventually, she took me to a private external tutor. Fast forward to 10th grade. He was sentenced to jail for 8 counts of misconduct and 3 counts of statutory rape. My mom never questioned my gut after that. I'm so thankful I never was alone with that man. Story 35. I was biking with my brother back home from the neighborhood pool after swim practice, and we saw a girl from the swim team walking home far ahead of us. We didn't pay much attention until a man in a golf cart drove up to the girl. The golf cart was empty, and it was only him in it, so he didn't really have a reason to be driving it around, which made us suspicious. It looked like the man was talking to the girl, but she wasn't looking at him or talking to him, like don't talk to strangers stuff. When my brother and I caught up to them, the man turned around to look at us and just drove away. The rest of the way to our house, we talked about how ducking creepy that looked. The next time we went to swim practice, the girl thanked us for getting him to leave, and that she didn't know who he was. That's probably the creepiest thing I've ever experienced. Edit, thanks guys for your support. This is only my first post, and now I actually have karma. Once again, thank you. Story 36. I was hiking with my friend a few years back on a random trail that seemed abandoned, but it was pretty. We came to an open field of sorts, and I just paused like my whole body involuntarily halted. I told my friend no way we should keep going. He protested and argued with me, but I just turned around and started walking. 2 days later, the police and park rangers are all over our campsite and was telling everyone to stay put because of an emergency, which turned out to be a man on the loose that had used that clearing as a way to stalk people and kill them. They only found out because a group went up there and one of the friends decided to keep hiking when the others turned back and they didn't hear from him. An officer and a police dog went looking later, expecting to just bump into the guy, but the dog picked up a trail and it was followed back to an abandoned cave with 4 bodies in it cut into pieces, and the guy tried to attack. When a cop went in, he managed to hurt the dog and get past the officer. They caught him later that night hiding in someone's tent who had gone into town to meet up with some friends. Edit, while almost 6 years, and this is my first silver thank you kind stranger. Story 37, not me, but one of my best friends growing up, her mom told me this story. They just bought this house that had a built-in swimming pool. My friend had a little brother who was under the age of 2 at the time. Everyone was taking a nap, but unbeknownst to the rest of the house, the 2-year-old had woken up and decided to go outside on their deck. I guess the mom woke up and had this terrible feeling come over here. Without hesitation, she quickly checked on her children. Panic set in. When she couldn't find the 2-year-old, she found him face down in the pool. He did survive the whole ordeal. If she wouldn't have felt that gut feeling to wake up, that little boy wouldn't be here today. I wish I could give more details on the story, but it was only told to me once when I was about 12. Story 38, not me, but my dad. When he was a teenager, his family owned a gas station. IDKY, before you ask. Anyway, these 2 guys show up, start pumping some gas. No big deal. They come inside, start checking out the snacks. Again, no big deal. Well, my dad gets a real strange feeling about these other guys that just pulled up. A couple. They start pumping some gas, start looking around, see the other guy's car. My dad says to one of the guys inside, "Hey, those 2 people seem to be checking out your car." One of the guys comes with 2 bags of potato chips and something like that. The other goes out BC apparently. He heeds gas station employees' gut feelings. He starts talking to this couple. Things start getting heated, and then the husband of the couple takes a pistol and points it at the guy that's talking to him. At this point, my dad has called his dad, and his dad is talking with the police, and it's a big mess. The guy with the potato chips is about to walk out the door. My dad says stop. He stops, and then the 2 guys start wrestling with the gun, and it points toward the door and fires. Nice gut, Dad, by the way. The husband and the guy outside were arrested. Dad has no idea what happened to either of them. Story 39. I pulled into a gas station around 8 to 9 p.m. That wasn't a ghost town or anything, but it was insanely dark due to the time of year. As I pulled towards one of the pumps, I see this dude slowly pacing near the entrance of the convenience store, and we make eye contact. I quickly pulled the car to another pump towards one of the entrances to the gas station, trying to be safer, but thinking him probably just being paranoid. Once I sit there for a minute and decide to put my car in park, he quickly rushes to my car. By the time I'm back in drive and peel out through the entrance in an oncoming lane, luckily no traffic, I saw him pulling out what looked like a large knife out of his jacket and glad I didn't disregard my gut. Story 40, when I was dating my wife, she used to call me at pretty predictable times. Sometimes we wouldn't talk to each other until like 6 p.m. at the latest, and we didn't ever text each other. We were young and in love and call it phone chicken now, as we would both wait as long as possible before calling one another. We didn't want to seem too eager, but one of us would always fold and call around the same time. And we also didn't want to be a couple who constantly texted each other. So she was a bit sick one Friday night, but nothing too serious to us, just a little cough, so we didn't think much of it. She stayed with me and was going to visit her parents a couple hours away the next morning for the weekend. I didn't hear from her since I left for work and just thought she was busy with her family at first. Turns out in chem lab the day before we were still in college, she had inhaled some ether or ammonia or something they were working with, and this gave her chemical pneumonia. She woke up the next day while at her parents' barely breathing and with a plethora of other complications. It was really bad, dangerously close to total respiratory failure. At this point, I did not know anything yet. Not to mention, if she was not visiting her family, I would have been at work and not there to help her. So I did not hear from her early on that day, and she usually did call early from her parents, as she was usually quite bored there. What was strange was it wasn't the normal, "I wonder why I haven't heard from her," that would cross my mind on days she was busy. I felt like I knew something horrible had happened and decided to call her parents' house around 3 p.m. I did not normally do this as we were just dating a little over a year and didn't feel that comfortable with them yet, as well as respected their private time with their daughter. They didn't answer and her phone was still off. It died as I was talking to her the night before. This is when my gut really kicked into high gear. I knew something happened. I did finally hear from her around 9 p.m. after a few gut-twisting hours of talking to her friends to try and find out what was going on and getting no answers. Needless to say, I immediately went over to the hospital. She was rushed to comfort her. She was actually genuinely pissed I wasn't at the hospital with her sooner and that I wasn't able to find out she was there, even though there was no way I could have found out as no one else knew, and I would have had to call the hospitals. I actually did consider doing this, or she would have had to contact me, but was being examined the whole time and didn't have her phone. She was also fairly drugged still. We joke about this now, but the grim truth is she could have died if she wasn't visiting her parents. Story 41, me and my sister walking home from primary school age 10, walking along this like ally way that's at the end of people's garden and a cemetery. Man asks us for the time, starts talking to us. Say, "You girls should be in the shower now." And like, what? Tell my sister to run. Look back, and he's standing there, jeans and pants around his ankles, masturbating to us. Edit ally way autoed to always. Story 42, a little late, but when I was around 12, 13, we went on a walk in the woods near my uncle's old house. I smelled something weird, but none of the others seemed to notice. I refused to go into those woods for years afterwards. And then, for years later, they found a corpse there. Said it had been there for about 4 years. I smelled a rotting human corpse. Nope,